So like I was saying, they didn't have any cell phones back then, and Joe was kind of like stranded on the side of this mountain road, and snow was coming down, and the temperature was kind of like dropping pretty fast. As it got colder and colder, Joe's heater in his car just quit working. So Joe needed to figure out something pretty fast, or he would freeze to death in his car. So as Joe was sitting there thinking, what the hell am I gonna do? I don't know what the hell's gonna happen. Two pairs of headlights in the distance appeared, and they started heading his way.
Joe thought, fuck yeah, I'm saved. He got out of his car and tried to wave them down. However, they stopped about 20 feet away from him. The people got out of one of the cars, all got into the other vehicle, which Joe said was a truck, and they started driving again. They ended up driving right past Joe and didn't even stop. Joe was like, what the hell? So he ended up going back to his car to rest a little bit.
I would have been so pissed. So while Joe was, resting in his car, he decided, hey, I need to go get some help. I either go make that decision now and get some help, or I sit here, freeze to death in my car, and I die. I don't want people to see me like this with my dick out in the car, frozen to death. Okay, maybe not with his dick out, but just frozen to death in his car. So he made the bold decision to hike down the snowy mountain road until he found someone. So he got out of his car, started walking down it, and as he was walking down this snowy mountain road, he passed the abandoned car from earlier. And he kind of thought to himself as he was walking past it, it's a little weird that someone had just left it there, sitting, that it was just abandoned. Now, Joe did eventually make it back home safely, and he ended up calling the police and said, hey, my vehicle's stuck up there. Also, some person abandoned their vehicle about 20 feet from mine. I just thought you guys should know. A little weird, just a little FYI.
Now, the next day on the 25th, a snowstorm actually came through the area, and this caused a delay in searching for the boys. Now, it wasn't until 3 days later, on February 28th, that the police were able to finally make it up to the snowy mountain to check out the abandoned vehicle. The vehicle ended up being Jack's 1969 Mercury Montego. So a few weird things about this is that Jack's car was 70 miles away from Chico, where the boys had been watching the basketball game at. Also, there was actually no one inside.
So some other things that the police noted about Jack's car is that it still had a quarter tank of gas left in it, but the keys to it were gone. And just a little FYI, I've heard two different stories when it came to the gas level. Some people say that it had a quarter tank of gas left in it. Others say that when the police found it, that it was empty, but the police ended up bringing gas up to it, filling it up a quarter of the way so that they could drive it back down the mountain instead of having a tow truck go up there. And then whenever they started documenting the evidence, that it was written down wrong in the evidence that it had a quarter tank of gas, when in reality, when it was found initially, it had no gas in it. So, just throwing that out there.
Knowledge nugget.
All right, so the police also found a ton of wrappers from snacks kind of scattered inside of the vehicle. Of course, those were the snacks that were purchased at the marketplace. They also found the tickets to the UC Davis game that the boys had previously gone to. And the police did note that the vehicle had looked like it had gotten stuck in the snow, but it wasn't stuck super bad. They stated that the 5 men could have easily pushed the vehicle out of the snow and kept going.
Yeah, so this, of course, only caused more confusion for the police and the boys' parents. They started to think, why would they be going up this dirt road on this mountain? The route back home was a simple, route. They had a map, so there was no way that they could have gotten lost. But somehow when the boys left the basketball game, instead of heading south towards their hometown of Yuba, they instead went east, like really far east.
Of course, everyone was just as confused as to the reason why the boys would be on this mountain. None of them had been there before. Also, the investigation was difficult. Since there was a snowstorm for a few days, after they disappeared, this ended up covering up any of the footprints that the boys might have left. However, the teams continued to search for the men, and if anything was ever found.
I did read up that some of the searchers almost got lost themselves when they were looking for them during these months. Kind of crazy. Like, that snowstorm brought in like 9 inches of snow, I think they said. Which means decent amount. So fast forward to June 4th of that year. During this time, the snow was melting away and the weather was super nice out. So some motorcyclists were out, for a joyride enjoying this nice weather. Well, as the motorcyclists were out riding, they happened to stumble upon a remote forest station, which are the ones that are used by the forest rangers in the event of emergencies. And side note, these stations are stocked with food, warm clothes, and even equipped with propane generators to provide warmth and lighting.
So as the motorcyclists were looking at the remote station, they noticed that one of them had a broken window on the side of it. So they were like, hey, let's go check this out to see, if there's any damage to the inside of the station and see if there's like maybe some animals crawling around in it or whatnot. Now what they found wasn't anything that they were expecting. And for one of the families of the 5 men, it was the worst news that they could ever receive.
So upon searching the station, the motorcyclists had spotted a body and they immediately alerted the authorities. The police came and looked around. They found that inside the remote station, underneath a bunch of thin sheets, Ted's lifeless body was just laying there. Ted's feet had extreme frostbite and he was extremely skinny. His body weight was nearly half of what it was supposed to be, and he had a long, grown-out beard. The police determined that Ted must have lived there in this station for the past 8 to 12 weeks before passing away.
Now, this seems pretty straightforward, However, there was something that didn't make any sense. So as the police searched the rest of the station, they started to notice the condition of it. Other than the broken window and the sheets covering up Ted's body, this station was never touched. It was in almost perfect condition. Now, I say other than the broken window and the sheets, there was cans of food, approximately 12 cans of food that had been opened and eaten. However, the food that was stockpiled there in the station was enough to last all 5 men for over a year. So,
that's a lot of food.
Hell yeah, it is. I know where I'm going whenever the apocalypse happens.
Right? These stations, wherever they are. Also, the police noted that outside, the propane generator was never used. It still had a full tank of fuel. One other thing that they found odd was that Ted's shoes were missing. Now, they did find one pair of tennis shoes there at the station. However, they were later identified as Gary Mathias's tennis shoes. Oh, and side note, guys, the Ted shoes that he didn't have on his feet, he had frostbite, the ones missing, they weren't normal tennis shoes. They were actually leather-bound shoes, so they were pretty well insulated. But they were bigger than, Gary's foot. Ted had big feet.
So keep that in mind. All right, so the next day, on June 5th, the police stated that the station that Ted's body was found at was about 19 to 20 miles from where Jack's abandoned car was found. So this caused the police to kind of expand their search area to see if they could locate the rest of the men. And it proved to be successful because they ended up finding 2 more bodies.
So on the opposite side of the road that led to the station, Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling's bodies were found. Now, Jack's body was already half eaten by animals and was believed to have been dragged around. And Bill's body was located in a wooded area by the road. However, his remains were mostly just bones by then.
2 days after that, on June 7th, Jackie Hewitt's father ended up finding his own son's remains. Now, what Jackie's father found was only the backbone of his son Jackie. And it is worth noting that Mr. Hewitt stated that he knew it was the backbone of his son whenever he found it, because not far from where he had, seen this backbone, one of his son's shoes was found nearby, which that has to be heartbreaking. Man.
Dude, that has to be.
Yeah. So after finding that backbone, the police began searching that area more intensively, and they found more of Jackie's remains. However, it was just bones and pieces of clothing. And then that following day, on June 8th, about 100 yards downhill, they ended up finding Jackie's skull. Weird.
So after this, the police stated that they suspected that Bill, Jack, and Jackie had all succumbed to the harsh snowstorm before even making it to the station and died of hypothermia. However, Ted ended up making it to the station. But the weird thing is that it was determined that he died of starvation, which of course is weird because the entire station was stocked with a lot of food. Now, the only body that they did not find was Gary's. And to this day, he is still considered missing because they still haven't found him.
So there you have it, the story of the Yuba County Five. 5 men who went missing, and only 4 of their bodies were found. And 1 man is still missing. All right, so let's hop into some strange facts and findings to talk about what we uncovered while sleuthing. So Dan, tell us about our first strange fact and finding.
So our first strange fact and finding, we're going to talk about a town called Brownsville. So Brownsville is a tiny town that is about 30 miles from where they had found Jack's car stuck in the snow on the mountain. Well, when flyers were put out for the missing men, a woman who worked at the store in Brownsville had come forward and told the police that she had seen 5 men show up in a red pickup truck. Now, this was supposedly 2 days after their disappearance that this woman had seen them. The woman also stated that she saw Jackie and the 2 men were at the store buying drinks and burritos. So the police questioned the store owner, who also confirmed the statement by the woman.
It's weird.
You know what makes it even weirder? Is that I believe it was Jackie. Yeah, it was Jackie's parents that were just like, this lady's lying. It's like, there's no way that Jackie would be using a phone booth. Because like earlier, Jackie gets very anxious when it comes to making phone calls. So they were just like, oh, she's lying. But, I mean, he had Bill with him. So he might not have been making the call. Bill could have been.
Yeah, that is weird. I mean, what would be the reason for the woman to lie? Fame?
I want to say there was a reward, but I don't think it was really much.
I think I read somewhere it was like $2,400 or like $2,000 or something like that.
24 or 2,500, I think.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to our next strange fact and finding, which is about Joe. You know, the guy that had a heart attack that night and tried calling for help, you know?
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Well, apparently, when Joe was questioned by the police, he actually told 2 different versions of his story. Now, the first version is the one that we already talked about. However, his second version of the story is a little more mysterious. So get this. Apparently, as Jack was waiting in his car, he stated that he heard some noises from outside. And this was after he had his heart attack, when he was just sitting there waiting in his car. He heard some noises from outside. He looked out his window, and he said he thought he saw a group of men and a woman with a baby. They were walking in the light of another vehicle's headlights. Joe opened his door and called out to them for help. He stated that immediately after that, they turned their lights off and the whistling stopped. Jack then said that a few hours later, he saw flashlight beams outside his car, and he then would open his car door and he's like, "Help! I'm fucking had a heart attack!" However, once he did that, the lights cut off immediately again. So Jack stayed in his car till it ran out of gas, and then that is when he decided to make his way down the road. And that is the second version of his story. However, I mean, it could have been all part of like Joe being delirious, you know, considering that he just had a heart attack and he wasn't seeing things clearly, you know, but we may never know.
Yeah. I mean, what would a woman and a baby be doing out in the snow?
And when he says that they were walking in the headlights of another vehicle, does that mean a vehicle was behind them with their headlights on and they were walking in front of it?
I would assume so.
That is weird.
It is.